radio and across the state on SWX Montana Television. Hi, how are you? Great to be with you on a Monday afternoon. Hope you are having a wonderful day. Thanks for spending some of it with us on your radios, on your TVs, on your devices, etc. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris is at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy, and online at kurtzpolaris.com. You can find us on the World Wide Web, 1029 ESPN.com. There you can listen to the stream. You click the Listen Live tab. It drops down. You click the deal, and boom, there we are. Well, when we're on live, we're also, the station is there 24 hours a day. You can check in whatever's going on 102.9 ESPN Radio. The stream is brought to us by Opportunity Bank, your local bank, your opportunity. If you'd like to call us, you can do that too. 329-1899, 329-1899, or guest join us via the Rangich Brothers RV phone line. Let's take a look at what we got in the show. This is what I call the Colter Nuanez show today. We got a bunch of...
It's always the Ryan Tutel show. I just participate.
No. It is Nuanez.
I'm the executive producer, cannot steer the ship without Ryan Tutel.
It's Nuanez, and Tutel today is what we got going. Carson Rostad committed, the Hamilton quarterback, an outstanding prospect, not for this next upcoming college football season, but for the following one. Rostad will be a senior this year at Hamilton High School. He's committed to the University of Montana to play football. We will go through some of the commits through the state of Montana and talk about where they're going and what the landscape of high school headed into college football looks like across the 406. So we will get into all of that stuff. Rylan Ort, your Gatorade Track and Field Athlete of the Year. We will talk about that a little bit. We will get into some other Montana basketball. Tony Miller's transfer out, which we talked about last week. It was broken on Skyline Sports MT, but we will talk about that in a little bit more detail. Also, Rashi Wortham, no longer on the staff at the University of Montana men's basketball team. He has been he's moved on, and now a replacement in for him, so we'll get into that a little bit as well. So plenty of things to get to, and also some Osprey baseball. The Osprey take 2 out of 3 from Great Falls over the weekend and feel, I think, pretty good about themselves, all things considered, as they welcome the Billings Mustangs into town tonight. So there you go. There's a show outlook, and without further ado, sometimes we like to do this around here. Instead of making them sit in the back room in the dark corner, we bring in our esteemed producer, engineer, all things to everyone. Oh, look at this. First thing he does.
Engineering issue.
Bang it into the microphone. Yeah, shake it around there. Hi, Tommy.
Hey, what's up?
Well, nothing. I'm very happy to have made you have been on this show in a lot of ways. You've been this show since the very beginning.
That's right.
I'm starting to wonder if maybe there's a rift that I don't know about. Maybe there's something that you don't like about me personally, which is fine. Like I understand. But I, for the first time, was on your show on the trail last week.
It was a lot of fun when you walked in.
I mean, 2 full breaks that you let myself and then Mike.
Ryan
Smith
got the lunchbox invite before me.
He didn't even come in the lunchbox. He just walked in. The sign was flashing on air live, and it was live. And he walks in, rips up 9 minutes of my show to talk about how great he is.
It
was awesome,
right? But I guess, I still don't feel, I did go in there. I was on the show. I'm happy to have been on it. I still haven't actually, I guess, gotten an invite. I've more sort of burglarized my way onto your show more than anything. So I'll look forward to it. But on Trail 103.3, our sister station, Tommy Evans, is doing afternoons and early evening. I mean, you're on that thing. What are you, about 14 hours a day?
Just
on
about.
The trail?
Noon to 9 daily. Monday through Friday. And then we engineer Osprey baseball from 6 to 11, 12.
Also the youngest radio engineer in America.
So, why aren't you in there now? Why are you here? It's 4:00 in the afternoon.
Sometimes you have to organize your priorities, and right now being with you in this room is a priority to me.
You run some music over there on the trail.
Yeah, I got some long songs
say, What's
playing.
up? Yeah. Okay, very good. Can I recommend some Tool? I realize that might not be on
you may not.
The A rotation on the
He's
trail,
going with Fall Out Boy.
Well, I'm
I'm going with the first Creed record.
Thank you. Finally, vindication.
It is a solid album, man.
Hey, look at this. Look at this. Look at this. He's coming around. This is the greatest moment of my life.
Okay.
Writing it down. I'm writing down the notebook.
this is something else. Anyhow,
What's your supposed rift? What were you getting at?
Well, why you hadn't had me on in like 5 years is what I was getting at. Like, I mean, we've been here, we've been working together, we've been friends, you've been, on the show, and yet, like, I can't even get a look over there with you. I was on with Craig.
Sure.
I was on with Alanya. I've been on with Robert.
Yeah, right.
Of times. I was on with Robert on his very first morning show that he ever did. I was very
That's
honored.
right.
Yet I can't get an invite from you, and I'm wondering why. Why?
Okay, I'll make it really short, and I won't go on a big tirade. Have you ever taken toothpaste and squeezed it out of the bottle?
The tube?
The tube?
The tube, yeah, sure. The toothpaste tube, bottle, whatever. Okay.
Yeah, I have.
Have you ever been able to put it back in?
No, it's a one-way street.
Same principle applies. I can't open a Pandora's box with you in any of my shows anywhere else ever.
You think that I don't have valuable content to offer?
I mean, valuable is like different for you than it is for me.
Okay.
So, not necessarily, no.
How was your weekend? Anything good happened? Did you play any Coin Dozer since we last spoke?
Oh, man, there was no Coin Dozer, but I did work a lot, and I did learn a lot of cool new things.
Okay.
And I did see my folks, which was quite nice.
Okay.
I watched the fireworks,
yeah.
out over at the stadium.
They do a nice job on those fireworks
Awesome.
down there at the Osprey, sure.
Awesome. I joined I met some great friends over in the parking lot at the Albertsons over there, like sort of across. What?
I mean, the list
Did you meet them there, or did you meet them for the first time
that
there?
is on the list of sentences that your parents hope your children will never utter. I met some of my good friends in the Albertsons parking lot.
No, it wasn't like that. It was a lot of normal people.
Okay, sure.
These are new friends.
Yeah.
They're new friends.
New friends.
They were set up there. They had,
the parking
coolers in their car and a lot of, lawn chairs and so on. And they set up and they go, look, if you want to watch the fireworks, this is the place to do it. Because I'm coming out of there with some, sorry, Coulter, some frozen mac and cheese, some Stofers, and a couple of donuts.
Food-like products.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's a big, terrible thing. Yeah. Don't eat the microwave mac and cheese. And I said, well, what are you guys sitting out here? Why do you have lawn chairs in the parking lot? They're like, fireworks night. So I joined them,
So you sat down?
They
right
had an
there
extra
with them.
chair. We hung out. We watched the fireworks. It was nice. So that was the highlight.
Thank you, Tommy.
I don't understand what all the laughter's about here.
No,
Because it's hilarious.
we're just happy to have
Shout
you.
out to Tommy Evans. He's got ESPN up and running, the Trail up and running. We're simulcasting on SWX, both Two-Tail Nuanez and Osprey Baseball.
I mean, it's pretty remarkable.
It has absolutely nothing to do with any person besides Tommy Evans.
Tommy Evans and his.
That's right. Dang it.
His macaroni and cheese fueled Jeep.
No wonder
Yeah,
he's so smart. It's all that good nutrition from Stofers.
Well, Tommy, I haven't given you a full 9 minutes like you gave me, but I think 6 is pretty good. And,
It's a real gentle get out of my studio that you nudged
Yeah, I'm going to
along.
punch you in the ear if you don't invite me on the trail for the next week. Thanks.
Your threats are so hollow, it's almost comedic.
Hollow.
Yeah.
You're right.
Hollow, man.
And it's all
Hollow.
because of the world we live in, not because of the
That's
amount
right.
of action that I would
That's
like to
right.
take.
What an awful place we live in where physical violence is looked down upon. What a terrible new world.
I mean, we could have a whole show about why that's actually the case, but we won't.
Pretty much we do. I mean, the reason we have a show is because actual hand-to-hand combat just for fun or because you don't like somebody has been relegated to places where there's referees controlling it, and now here we are yammering about it. That's what this is.
So
All
you're
right.
saying this is my calling.
Yeah, I am.
Stick to your clock. I'm going to leave you to it.
No
4:10
chance.
right now.
Okay, we got 16 minutes. Thank
Yeah,
you,
no
Tommy.
chance. Biggest segment of the year, no chance.
Carson Rostad
Thanks, Tommy.
has committed to the University of Montana. Carson Rostad, an outstanding young player. Is he the first commit from the 2020 class
For the University of Montana, yes, he is.
for the University of Montana? His first commit.
First offer, first commit.
He is from Hamilton.
Yep.
Hamilton has been on an absolute tear. Are they a 2-loss team in the last 2 seasons? Total?
Undefeated to the state championship game, back-to-back years. Lost in the
Lost
state
in the
championship
state.
game, back-to-back years.
Carson Rostad is a 6'3", 205-pound junior coming into his senior year of high school. And what Hamilton has been up to on the gridiron these last couple of years has been outstanding. And, even at the high school level, new coach, that's great. I think a lot of new energy, I think a new approach, that's good. But also, guess what? You got to have players. You got to have players to get it done. And Carson Rostad is not the only one. There's some talented kids down there at Hamilton, but he has certainly been, I think, the leader on the field. Obviously, the quarterback spot, a big key. And he did not take a lot of time to make a decision about where he was going to go and is committed to the University of Montana. And this is significant news and opens up a larger conversation, Golter, not just about him and Montana, but about the landscape of high school football in the state, where the top 10 kids in the state are going to go, and what the subsequent rosters look like, specifically at Montana State and at UM.
It's very interesting to analyze high school kids, especially one from right down the road, when he bursts onto the scene so early. I mean, I've known about Carson Rostad since he was a freshman. I mean, he threw 30 touchdown passes his freshman year, and they went to the state playoffs. So, Bryce Carver and his crew, they've built this Hamilton program around Rostad, and when they burst,
wise,
absolutely. Yeah. But when somebody bursts on the scene like that, and they are a transcendent player early, it's almost as if, usually, even for somebody that covers this stuff pretty intensively, you don't really know who kids are until right now in Rostad's career. You usually know who guys are when they have a big junior year. They're coming into their senior year. They're among those top offers. I mean, guys like Gabe Sulser and the like, they were getting recruited really hard right in their junior year, because that's kind of the standard timeline. But we just have known who Rostad was for a long time, and it's actually ironic because then all of a sudden you start to analyze him so much that you're thinking about what he doesn't do well instead of what he does do well.
Isn't that interesting? Where almost if you hit the board and the sort of the eye too early, you get the build up, and then all of a sudden people incrementally start. Well, what about this? Well, what about that? Whereas if you had only 6 months, you'd be, hey, this is the greatest recruit you ever see, whatever.
Tyler Hall comes out after his sophomore year, he probably gets drafted.
Yeah,
Tyler Hall just snuck into the Bulls Summer League camp today. We'll talk about it next hour. But Montana State standout, all-time leading scorer in the history of the Big Sky Conference. But his peak in terms of hype and exposure and draft stock was at its highest 2 years ago, even though he is likely a better player now.
Totally.
And that's just exactly how it works in human nature. So let's talk about the good of Carson Rostad. Okay. I think Carson Rostad has a great frame. I think he has great mobility. He's a good athlete. I think that he is an exceptional decision maker. He has never thrown more than 7 interceptions in a single season, despite the fact that he started 35-plus varsity games in the last 3 years. He threw 43 touchdowns and 7 picks last year, while also rushing for almost 700 yards and scoring 10 more touchdowns. Now, skeptics would say, hey, in the Southwestern A, it's not that dynamic of a league. He's throwing to wide open receivers quite often. They run a really sophisticated offense. Bryce Carver has done a great job in scheming it up for those guys. All that said, Hamilton was a powerhouse in the Class A level, and then we're sort of dormant for close to 2 decades, and now they're back. And it's no coincidence. It's because they have the centerpiece in this really talented quarterback. I think he's got good arm strength. I think he is confident, and I'm just so interested to see. So often you take guys, if you're Montana or Montana State, who are quarterbacks at the high school level, and you say, hey, if he works out at quarterback, great, but we can play him somewhere else. I think Carson Rostad is one of the better quarterbacks I've seen come out of Montana in the last 5 or 6 years. But I don't know what his position versatility is, which actually ironically makes him a bigger risk, because I think he is an exceptionally good quarterback. And I think he does have Division I abilities at quarterback. But if he doesn't make it, or if he gets beat out by somebody who's more talented, which at the quarterback position is more likely to happen, just because only one guy usually plays, right? I mean, if you just have some hotshot 3-star, 4-star guy, or you get a transfer, or you don't win the competition, being the number 2 quarterback does not equal any reps, most likely. Whereas being the number 2, everything else equals reps.
You're not Troy Anderson. You're not just going to go play linebacker now.
Totally. And I just don't know what other position he can play. But What I do know is that he for sure wants to be a Grizz. I mean, he's Jordy Tripp's cousin. His mother and Jordy Tripp's mother are sisters. So he's got Grizz in his blood, which means this has probably been a dream come true for him. And he also will put everything into it that he needs to put into it to develop. And I think the other thing that's key here is that, first of all, he's the first non-AA player to win Gatorade Player of the Year since 2007. He's the first non-senior to win Gatorade Player of the Year in 5 years. So he is a unique guy in the state of Montana.
Yeah.
And that resonates so much because you're going to recruit likely the top 6 to 8 AA guys are going to get recruited. But now you have a small school kid who's committed to the Grizz as the first commit for the Grizz. And we've seen this a lot in the last several years with Twitter, with social media. When the first domino falls, it often has a big impact on the way that the rest of the class goes. When Gabe Sulser committed, now we're talking about a lot of the great guys we're talking about on the University of Montana roster. They're the redshirt freshmen that are part of that class. They're the dudes who Sulser committed, then they committed. And a lot of the time it's not completely point A, point B. It's not one thing leads to the other, but it does have a big influence on it. You saw it a couple years ago with Troy Anderson at Montana State, too. And the thing that's been interesting is that the top guy has been the first guy to commit multiple years in a row. And the way that affects the rest of the recruiting battle, it's fun to watch. And make no mistake, this is a big commit for the Grizz.
It's Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, SWX Montana Television, and also online on YouTube. Tutel Nuanez YouTube channel. Go check it out there. Thanks for being with us. Coulter, continuing along those lines, it's interesting because we understand the recruiting battle in the state of Montana and how important it is to both Montana and Montana State. And it's been fairly even recently, which I think, to me, makes it fun. To me, I think it is I understand why you grade out recruiting classes and we all understand, the FBS, and they rank all the, recruiting classes and how well, but no one knows how good a recruiting class is until that recruiting class is playing football for that school.
Totally.
And so we don't know how this stuff is going to work out. But in Montana, it's unique too. In the following respect. Let's say you had the 10 best offensive linemen in the entire Big Sky at your school, in your Montana or Montana State.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the best recruit in the state of Montana coming up that next year is an offensive lineman,
mm-hmm.
but isn't going to get a sniff because of how elite the offensive line that you currently have is. It would not matter. Your entire goal would be to get that kid in the doors at your school if you are the Grizz or if you are the Cats, because it's not always, and I don't even know that Carson Rostad, even as the Gatorade, Player of the Year, when you talk about this, when you talk about, the first one that's non-AA since 2007, when you talk about the first non-senior in a while as well, maybe it is a pretty consensus best player in the state for this 2020 class. But my point is, it's not always clear, who is the obviously best player in the state of Montana when it comes to football. But if you can get that guy, it doesn't matter, A, how good he is or what position he plays for Montana or Montana State. You want to get the best player in your state, period, end of story. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your roster construction looks like. Doesn't matter if it's a, quote, down year at the high school level and maybe it's not as – you want to get that guy because it does influence what happens after that. And it's, by the way, it's no surprise that the, quote, unquote, best player in the state has been the first commit the last 3 or 4 years because, A, they're being recruited the hardest, the earliest, and the teams want to get that so now they can move on and start to go, start to use that to feed their system, here within the state.
Right, and quarterback is always going to make more headlines than the other position.
Right.
But also, when you have a guy like Bryce Carver who played for the Grizz, who played for Bobby Hauck, who has a stud quarterback in Hamilton, 45 minutes away from Missoula, you just can't let the Cats come in there and get that guy. You got to
get that guy with
he's,
with the familial ties and all of it.
He's got the familial ties. He's from right down the road. He plays for an ex-Grizz. You can't let that guy get out of your backyard. You just can't. as far as if he's the consensus number one player, I said in the tweet reporting this, I said one of the best prospects in Montana. I had a couple Grizz fans respond saying he's the best prospect in Montana. I think he's one of the best prospects in Montana. I think that every year there's between 4 and 10 guys who are surefire, full ride, FCS type guys. And a lot of times the top 2 or 3 are surefire FBS type guys or borderline. Gabe Sulser was a kind of a borderline FBS guy. If Troy Anderson would have gotten seen by the right people, he could have been a surefire FBS guy. But guys like Matt Miller, Tanner Roderick, Matt Hulstad, guys like that, Brock Osweiler, those guys are surefire FBS guys. But this year in the in-state, I think that Carson Rostad, I think Jackson Lee, formerly of Flint Creek Co-op, who's now at Missoula Sentinel, McCade O'Reilly, who's at Bozeman High, and DeMarcus Carr from Billings West. I think those 4 guys are the surefire scholarship guys. And then I think that there's a smattering of other guys, including I really like Tommy Malott from Butte. I think he's a really good player. He's been offered by both schools. I'm not sure what the stipulations of the scholarship are, but he's a good player too. But Rostad is a good commit, and I think that this is a good domino for Montana. The other thing I want to get into with you, though, is that Bobby Hauck, entering his second season at the helm, this will be his 3rd recruiting season, but he was able to hold on to Gabe Sulser, sign him, even through the midst of a coaching change. Great get, considering his talent. Great get, considering his pedigree. Also a get that you should get, because his dad played for the Grizz. His sister runs track here. I mean, he is a Grizz. Last year, there wasn't necessarily that consensus number 1 guy, but now that the dust is kind of settled, it seems as if probably the best guys were Ryan Lonergan, who's going to the Cats, and Jesse Owens, who's coming to the Grizz. But Jesse Owens tore it up in the Badlands Bowl. Jesse Owens looks pretty good. And so that's a good get because he almost played college basketball. So that's a good recruiting job by Bobby Hauck. And then now you get the number 1 guy on most people's quote-unquote boards in Carson Rostad. So I find it interesting that the Cats have won 3 straight Cat Grizz games, that the Cats were a playoff team last year when the Grizzlies missed the playoffs 3 years in a row. The Cats are entering year 4 under Jeff Choate, whereas they're only entering year 2 under Bobby Hauck. Yet, again, you can't necessarily say Jesse Owens was the absolute consensus at the day he signed, but Gabe Sulser, Carson Rostad, and then a lot of other really good Montana guys in the last couple of years going the Grizz way. And I think it's a testament to, 1, the reputation of Bobby Hauck and how that resonates with kids that are right now in high school. Because you have to think, last time Bobby Hauck was here, some 10, 11, 12 years ago, the kids that are now in high school, they were at an incredibly impressionable age. They're between 7, 8, 9 years old. That's when you are really, it's really making an impact on you completely, in a non-detailed fashion, just a completely emotional way, who's winning in the state. And I also think it's a testament to the facilities, because Montana State has good facilities, but they don't have the Champions Center. I think that's already paying dividends, especially in state for Montana.
Let me ask you if you think this is also worth noting. Justin Green, Chan Schillinger,
yep,
Chad Germer.
Yep.
They've been on the staff.
Yep.
They're Montana guys. They've been there. And when you talk about the individuals actually out doing the recruiting in the state, certainly the head coaches there doing it. And Jeff Choate's been at Montana State on this tenure longer, 4 times as long, in fact, and a little less than that, than has Bobby Hauck, even though Bobby Hauck obviously has all the ties you could have. But the staff has turned over significantly at Montana State, and while they bring in a couple of guys who are Montana State guys who have Montana ties and all that, they're relatively new to that spot, and in some cases brand new to that spot, whereas Justin Green has been the recruiting coordinator for the University of Montana for quite some time now. He's a significant
3 different
tenure.
coaches, 4 different coaches.
And so even though you're going back through head coaching tenures, that consistency, I think, contributes as well to some of this. And by the way, it's not clear to me that Montana is just winning the in-state recruiting battle. I think it is very I think there's a lot of balance there at this point, which I think is good. But as you said, it's when you say Sulser, Owens, Rostad, obviously, Robbie Hauck, okay, as a given, but that's a good in-state group to be having for Montana, no doubt.
100%, and that's where, when you really dive into this thing, all the guys that I would say that Grizz followers, Grizz fans should have excitement over: Dalton Sneed, Sammy Akem, Samari Torrey, Jerry Lou McGee. Those are kind of the Bob Stitt holdovers besides Dalton Sneed, from the air raid offensive influx that Bob Stitt tried to manifest. On the defensive side, obviously, Dante Olson. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the rest of the guys who you would say, I'm high on that guy. I think that guy is a talent. I think that guy's a rising star. Talk about Nash Fouch from Woodinville, Washington. You talk about, every other guy I can think of off the top of my head is a Montana guy who's a sophomore or younger. Robbie Houck, you mentioned, but then you talk about Garrett Graves, Levi Janicaro, Gabe Sulser, Drew Turner, both Bryson and Braden Deming, Matt Rensfold, Jackson Pepe, Jace Lewis. These are all Montana guys who are young that have come to the University of Montana, regardless if it's because of Bobby Houck or because of the Grizz brand or because of the Champion Center. But you compare that to the guys who are sophomores or younger, and make no mistake, Montana State has had better Montana guys in the upper class the last couple of years, namely guys like Tucker Gates and Grant Collins. And now this year, Braden Conkle certainly is probably the best Montanan besides Troy Anderson on either of these two rosters. Chase Benson, he's a guy that's a rising star. But then you look at some of the other guys. Tatum Gilman out of Kalispell, I'm high on him. I think he's a good player, but he's not yet a starter as a sophomore. Lane Sumner from Huntley Project. He's going to be a redshirt freshman running back for Montana State. Nolan Askelson, he might be a starting middle linebacker as a redshirt freshman. But other than that, I would take Montana's young guys. Mm-hmm. And I have not said that in the last couple of years. Since we've been doing the show, I've been saying Montana State has had the better Montana guys. I would take Montana's in-state guys that are sophomores or younger over Montana State's right now. And that's a shift. And I just find it very compelling because usually you can tie in-state success to Brawl of the Wild success. And Montana has lost 3 straight of these games, yet they are not more than keeping pace. But I do think that those 3 guys you named, with the addition of Mike Ferreter as well,
yes,
who's now at Idaho State, the first year of the Stitt recruiting cycle, when Ty Gregorak had left and Bob Stitt had some hype because he'd beat North Dakota State, he'd made the playoffs, they went all over the place. They were throwing darts at the map. They're recruiting kids from Virginia and Oklahoma and Texas and all over the place, and they didn't recruit Montana that hard. Well, it started to come back to bite them right away. And I know that those 4 guys that we mentioned told Bob Stitt, we can't do this. We have to, because Jeff Choate hired B.J. Roberson as the director of high school operations. His job is to basically be the liaison of Montana high schools. So they're recruiting everywhere.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact that Shannon Schillinger and Justin Green were like, hey, we can't do this. We have to hit Montana hard. And so credit to those guys for being able to do it. And I also think credit to Bobby Houck because he had 10 really quality in-state commits that were already committed to Montana when he took over, and he kept every single one of them. And that's what's going to lay the foundation for what Montana hopes to be in these rebuilding years, then hopefully into getting over the top.
It's Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio, SWX Montana Television, YouTube, Tutel Nuanez channel. Take a quick break, try and appease our dear friend Tommy, and continue on some of this stuff. I have another question about Carson Rostad as a quarterback, which none of these other guys are that I want to talk about, and also extend the list a little bit of some of these in-state recruits and where they might go and what that might mean. So all this continue coming up. It's Tutel Nuanez. Back right after this.
Hey, Tutel Nuanez here. Can't tell you how many times we've heard the face for radio joke since we came on SWX television, but it's been a fun endeavor so far.
And now our esteemed producer Tommy is pushing the envelope even further. We got our own YouTube channel.
That's right. If you want to watch us every day from your computer, your tablet, your cell phone, you can check out Tutel Nuanez on YouTube.
Tutel Nuanez, live every weekday from 4 to 6 in the afternoons on 102.9 ESPN Radio for Missoula, SWX Montana statewide, and now around the planet Earth on YouTube. Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River.
At the Montana Club, our goal is to create a menu of mouth-watering food with variety to satisfy any craving. From the garden fresh ingredients in our salads to our succulent, perfectly grilled Montana Club Angus steaks, we take pride in every detail that goes into preparing your food. Top off your meal with a premium cocktail, wine, or microbrew. Come as you are and satisfy your craving with our home-style breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the Montana Club on Brooks and North Reserve, Missoula.
Alpine Touch has been providing you with the distinct seasonings you know and love for decades. Now, Alpine Touch has something to help you unleash the freshness of all the delicious flavors you need to spice up any meal. Check out Alpine Touch's new coarse grinds, unleashing the fresh taste of the garlic pepper or all-purpose seasonings to please any nose or taste bud. Coarse grinds can be purchased by the pound at retail locations around the state or at alpinetouch.com. Use the code ESPN10 at checkout to get 10% off any online order. Alpine Touch, Montana's special spice.
Les Schwab is proud to introduce two of our best tires ever, just in time for summer. There's our exclusive Reputation, a high-mileage premium passenger tire we believe has the quietest, most comfortable ride ever. Or our exceptionally quiet and smooth all-season traction tire, the Open Range AT. Get $50 off alignment when you purchase a set of 4 Open Range AT or Reputation tires. Book an appointment today at leschwab.com. Les Schwab Tires. Doing the right thing matters. Cannot be combined with other offers. Limited time only. See details at leschwab.com.
On Russell, across from the fairgrounds.
Jayco and Rangish Brothers are teaming up once again. We take pride in being Western Montana's #1 Jayco dealer and strive to continually offer you the best quality, pricing, and reliability. To celebrate the arrival of summer, we are offering June hot buys. From RVs to parts and service, we got you covered. Save big on Jayco J-Flight SLX, 264 bunkhouse travel trailer, Sleep 7 starting at only $14,995 with payments as low as $149 per month OAC. Don't miss our June hot buys going on now. Only where a handshake means something. Rangish Brothers RV Center.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good afternoon, Ryan Tutel, Coach at Nuanez, 109 ESPN Sports Center. Carson Rostad has committed to the Montana Grizzlies. Rostad, the 2018 Montana Gatorade Player of the Year from Hamilton, gave his commitment to sign with Montana for the class of 2020 over the weekend. The 6'3", 205-pound quarterback is widely considered the top prospect in the state of Montana. He chose the Grizzlies over an offer from Montana State. As a junior, Rostad threw for 2,794 yards and 43 touchdowns, while also rushing for 694 yards and 10 more scores, helping the Bronx to the Class A state title game for the second straight season. Rostad is the maternal cousin of former Grizz All-American linebacker Jordan Tripp.
Missoula Sentinel senior Rylan Ort is the Montana Gatorade Track and Field Athlete of the Year. The three-sport athlete, who is set to play football at Montana State next season, dazzled the Treasure State with his booming throws in the javelin all spring. Ort twice broke into the top 6 marks in the nation in the javelin, including threatening the all-class record with a heave of 208 feet 8 inches at the Class AA state championship meet in Kalispell.
Montana State received a commitment from Colstrip standout Trey Yates over the weekend. The younger brother of former Montana State captain Tucker Yates gave his commitment at Montana State's individual camp. He is the reigning Class BC heavyweight wrestling champion.
And finally, Kevin LaChance's grand slam in the bottom of the 7th inning lifted the Missoula Osprey to a 7-4 win over Great Falls on Sunday in Missoula.
Now they always say congratulations. Work so hard, forgot how to vacation. They ain't never had the dedication. People hating, say we changing, look, we made it. Yeah, we made it. That was never friendly. Yeah. No, I'm jumping out of Bentley. Yeah. And I know
being the best prospect in the state and also being a quarterback, an interesting confluence. It is Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy, online at kurtzpolaris.com. We are on Twitter. You ever heard of that thing? What a deal that is. The best and worst of humanity all in one easy-to-use website and application. At Gus Tutel, at 102.9 ESPN, and at Skyline Sports MT on there. Coulter, I know that we have a list of some prospects that you wanted to go through here and talk about a little bit, but I would like to talk maybe a little bit more about some of the uniqueness of the best player in the state, potentially the best prospect in the state, who is also a quarterback. And you touched on it in the last segment, saying, him not necessarily being a guy that you could play or would want to play at a position other than the one that he's at, as good as he is at quarterback in Carson Rostad, that makes it a little bit riskier in a certain way. And it is unique that, let's put it like this, very often the best prospects in the state of Montana have been linemen, maybe running back, maybe like a linebacker, or maybe just straight athlete, right? Like a guy who just has the size, the speed, whatever it is, and it's like, we're going to figure out where we're going to play this guy. But quarterback being such a position of, skill and mind as well, and also traditionally the state of Montana not being a pass heavy quarterback sort of coaching and grooming sort of state at the high school level. I mean, it's been a lot more ground and pound, a lot more defense, historically speaking. And I realize that's a shift across the board in terms of football in general, and that, what is the higher percentage of passing and that sort of thing. But nonetheless, when you're talking about a quarterback, it's almost the exception to the rule, where in the state of Montana, you take everybody you can get from the state of Montana and then you fill in the gaps around it, so to speak. I mean, that's for the shorthand for it. But at quarterback, you go, we got to find the best quarterback we could possibly find. And if he comes from Timbuktu, it does not matter. We got to get the guy who can play quarterback in here. And so even though Carson Rostad may be the best quarterback, perhaps even the best player as a prospect in the state of Montana, he's going to have to compete not just to be one of 3 linebackers, one of 2 or 3 running backs, one of 5 or 7 offensive linemen. He's going to have to compete against, quite honestly, everybody in the country to be the quarterback, the one and only on the football team. And I'm wondering, I don't know, it just seems that dynamic is maybe a little bit different in this particular situation with this particular kid than it normally has been.
This is it's a great impromptu segment right here. Because what you said, a lot of times they are guys that play in the trenches. A lot of times they're just athletes who actually play quarterback at the Montana high school level.
Right.
I mean, think about the guys I just named. I mean, Braden Deming, who's a tight end now, high school quarterback. Levi Giannicaro. He's got no chance to play quarterback at the D1 level, but he's a D1 athlete for sure. Because he's playing quarterback.
Right.
Garrett Graves. When we saw Garrett Graves in the spring, he's an underwhelming quarterback, but we both agree, get that guy on the field. I mean, he could play outside linebacker, D end, running back, fullback.
What'd you say? Put the football on the field and let him pick it up and see what happens.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think but I think it's a really, really interesting thing to weigh, because actually the broad premise of what you said, that Montana has always been a kind of a ground and pound, run oriented state. Montana has actually produced a tremendous amount of really, really good quarterbacks, not just in the modern era, dating back for years and years and years. I mean, Jim McElwain going to Eastern Washington University, Marty Morningweg, who we're going to tease to have on the show here. He'll be our ESPN roundtable this week. He's a Montana guy, He's a guy that went all the way to the pros. Brent Pease, I know he's from Coeur d'Alene, but he has Montana roots. He's a guy that went all the way to the pros. And then you look at Montana has 2 national championships, right? 1995, 2001. Dave Dickinson, Great Falls, Montana.
Yep.
John Edwards, Billings, Montana. So the 2 national championships of the modern era in the state of Montana were won by Montana guys. Then you look at guys like Matt Kege from Havre, who went to Washington State. You look at Ryan Leaf, runner-up for the Heisman at Great Falls. Brady Leaf, starter at Oregon, Great Falls. And then you look at guys like Mike Riley, who and this is where it gets kind of funky. A guy like Mike Riley, neither Montana school recruited him that hard out of Flathead. Well, he goes to Washington State, competes for a little bit, then goes to Central Washington. He's a 3-time Division II All-American. Now he's been in the CFL for about 12 years. He's a 2-time CFL MVP. He's from Flathead.
Yeah.
And he didn't really get much love because people are like, well, he's a quarterback in Montana who doesn't have another position. Well, he's been making money playing football for over a decade now, right? And then you got the guys like that are just they're out of the stratosphere of even the Montana schools recruiting, guys like Brock Osweiler, who who's just going Pac-12 day one.
Yeah.
And
in whichever sport he wants.
Whatever sport he wants. And he's making $75 million to play quarterback.
I mean, he should have only made 68. They overpaid.
Still one of my favorite lines ever. Brian Fish, former Montana State coach, he said, boys, when it's all said and done and I've gotten fired from all my jobs, and you write Brian Fish, the former coach, this, that, and the other, if anywhere in that paragraph it says, at one time made $75 million, you can write whatever you want about me. And it's the truth. But then there's been a lot of plucky guys like Justin Hartman, Kyle Sampson, guys that were really good high school quarterbacks who kind of got pigeonholed and no one let them play quarterback. Guys like Mike Farrader. I mean, Mike Farrader was the best quarterback in the state of Montana, in my opinion, with my class. And I mean, he went on to be a 4-year starter at receiver for University of Montana, but never really was given the opportunity. Then you got guys like, Jake Bluskin. Jake Bluskin could straight spin it. Jake Bluskin is remembered for this terrible game where he got ragdolled by Tonga Takai, Tyrone Holmes, and Zach Wagaman over and over again, threw 5 picks at Washington Grizzly Stadium. Jake Bluskin was a great quarterback. He just couldn't, 1, beat out Dakota Prukop because it was a completely different offense, and then 2, had to run that spread zone read Tim Cramsey offense without the necessary skill set. If Jake Bluskin just would have been at the University of Montana, that 2012 season when Jordan Johnson was suspended, never would have happened. If Jake Bluskin would have been at a lot of different schools in the Big Sky, that was used to be our discussion, was Jake Bluskin's the number 2 quarterback at Montana State. If he was at Northern Colorado or Weber State or Northern Arizona, what would Jake Bluskin be doing? He'd be an all-league quarterback because he was an all-league quarterback. So I guess that's all to say that I think that oftentimes people, what I said early on in my analysis of Carson Rostad, I said it's hard to evaluate because he's throwing to a lot of really open guys. They're running a sophisticated system. But if history tells us anything, it's that these Montana guys are better than we think they are. And I think people think they're not quite as good because they're playing against Montana competition. Namely, DBs in Montana are just not D1 guys. They're just not. It's almost never you're going to have a D1 corner in Montana. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. But I do think that these Montana guys are better than people give them credit for, and history shows us that. I just named 20 guys that are good enough to play D1 quarterback at the Big Sky Conference level.
And first of all, too, if you are running a system that is a sophisticated system, in your words, that's so much more important than, quote-unquote, the competition that you are or aren't playing against at the high school level. Are you learning how to play the position that's going to translate to the next level? The competition that you play against is just almost across the board of any sport. When you go from one level to the next, it's not nothing, but it's minor. How good are you at what you do? That's what we want to know. And if you're playing against toddlers, if you're 6'5" and 230 pounds and can throw it 80 yards, then you can play. It just doesn't. That stuff. It's not in your control, and it doesn't matter anymore.
I also think that the top level of college football has had a really negative influence on the FCS level of college football because of the infiltration of the narrative that you can find Trevor Lawrence, you can find Tonga Tuaviola. You can find guys that are redshirt freshmen or true freshmen that are ready to go lead you to a national championship. That completely demeans the whole point of what the FCS level is, and it's about player development. What's Carson Ross at right now? He's not ready to go play in a game in Washington Grizzly Stadium. He's not. The speed of the game is way too much for him. But we've given these guys way too accelerated at timetables. Dave Diggins is the greatest player in the history of the Big Sky Conference. There's no question. He wasn't a starter until he's a redshirt sophomore. He was in the program for 2 full years before he got to be a starter, right?
Yep.
But Johnny Edwards was not the starter until his 4th year in the program. He's a redshirt junior. And because of the Trevor Lawrences of the world, the Jake Fromms of the world, all these true freshmen that come in and take Power 5 programs by storm, Justin Herbert even at Oregon, we think, well, that should happen at this level too. And it is a fair level of comfort to have a Denarius McGee, who's your starter from his redshirt freshman year through his redshirt senior year. That gives you so much continuity. If you win a Big Sky title with that guy, it's a double-edged sword, right? If you win, Denarius McGee won Big Sky Conference Player of the Year and was the Big Sky Conference champion when he was a redshirt freshman. Well, now he has top 5 in the country expectations for the rest of his career.
Sure.
You have to fulfill those. Else it's considered a lackluster finish. But I also think that we should just give these guys a lot more time. And I think that's what I always circle back to, is that's the brilliance of Bobby Hauck's program. Why is Bobby Hauck a good coach? Because Bobby Hauck develops guys on the proper timeline for what Montana facilitates.
Right.
You have to remember, Shan Schillinger got drafted in the NFL. He did not start until he was a junior. No one did. You didn't start at Montana unless you were an absolute phenom.
But I guess this is my point too of the singularity of quarterback.
And that's
right?
true too.
Because Jalen Hurts is the SEC Player of the Year, goes and wins a national championship, and the next year in the championship game, he's replaced and now can't get on the field and is now transferred to Oklahoma. Why? Not because he's not great, not because he's not even better than he was, but because the next guy up was a revelation. And for a guy like Carson Rostad, who he comes in,
totally.
Well, what do we know about who's 14 years old right now that might be playing in Kansas that might show up, and then what do you do?
And only one guy has to beat you out.
You're not one of three at a position or whatever.
2.5 years ago, no one would have ever said that Gresh Jensen was going to be the starter at University of Montana. He's not even at the University of Montana.
That's right. He's at Texas State.
I saw this firsthand, up close and personal. Cole Burquist was one of my roommates in college. He was brought in to be the Golden Boy quarterback. He was given every opportunity in the world to start when he was a redshirt freshman. He couldn't quite seize it. Him and Jason Washington went back and forth, and then Cole rose up and he won the job outright right before the Idaho State game late in our freshman year. And they won at Idaho State, and then Cole was the starter down the stretch. But then Bobby brings in Josh Schwager and was like, okay, Washington State dropped down. What do you got, Burquist? Beat him out. Cole couldn't beat him out. And Cole was so depressed that year. He was just like, well, what am I doing? What am I going to do? But the culture was different in college football. Cole never thought about transfer. Burquist was never like, I'm out. He was like, I just got to get better. Well, then what does he do? He goes on and starter junior and senior year, back-to-back national championship games, throws 60-plus touchdowns in 2 years. Yep. And that's what college football is all about, especially at the FCS level. And that's what drives me so crazy about kids just saying, last year, Dalton Snead beat out Gresh Jensen. A lot of people would say Gresh Jensen didn't get a fair shake. Regardless, here nor there, Dalton Snead beat him out. But if you know anything about Bobby Hauck, the competition's never over. If Gresh Jensen would have stayed, maybe he would have had opportunity sometime last year. But regardless of that, it's the exact same timeline that Cole Burquist was in. If Gresh Jensen stays, now we got a quarterback, because that's the thing. Dalton Snead was great last year. He was the Big Sky Conference Newcomer of the Year. If Gresh Jensen was still in the program, this would be an open competition coming into fall camp, period. If Gresh Jensen beat him out, okay. And some people would argue that's not good for your program to have the lack of continuity at that position. But on the other hand, you're always going to have your best guy play in the spot. I just don't like when guys straight walk away. But on the other hand, at quarterback, how can you blame them? Because if you do lose out multiple times, I mean, look at Cam Humphrey. We both think Cam Humphrey's good. Cam Humphrey would start at Montana State, wouldn't he?
Would seem like he would.
Exactly. And Cam Humphrey is kind of in the same situation. He came in, pushed Dalton Snead, didn't quite win the job. They're going to have a competition, but let's make no mistake. Dalton Snead's the captain of the team. Cam Humphrey's not beating him out. So where are you at when you're Cam Humphrey? You're just going to wait your turn? And if he does, I have a lot of respect for him if he does.
I do too. And he has set himself up to be that guy. And by the way, all the Carson Rostad talk, which is reasonable because today's, the news of his commitment and so forth and so on. Chris Brown is sitting there on the roster right now. Redshirt freshman quarterback from the state of Montana, from Bozeman. Who knows what he's going to bring to the table? And does he have all the fanfare at the front coming out of high school that maybe Ross had? Well, probably not. But what do you know? He's 24 months older, going to have a 2-year lead in the program.
No doubt.
What's that going to look like?
No doubt. But so often, what makes programs great is when there's just an understanding. Brian Ayat won the Peyton Award his first year as a starter. He'd been sitting behind Dave Dickinson for 3 years.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's also just crazy to watch just the way the pendulum swings. At one moment in time, 2014, Daenerys McGee had just graduated at Montana State. Montana State had Dakota Prukop, Jake Bleskin, Tanner Roderick, who in my mind is the most dominant high school player I've seen this decade. and Quinn McQuarrie all battling
Sitting
it
there.
out.
Yeah.
Dakota Prukop wins. Jake Buskin rides number 2 for the rest of his career. Quinn McQuarrie he says, I'm out. I'm going to Montana Tech. All-American at Montana Tech. Tanner Roderick switches to receiver. It's amazing how you can have an embarrassment of riches like that and then be playing linebackers at quarterback.
Yeah. All right. Good stuff. Stu Tell Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. Quick break, come back. Prep extra segment. Going to touch on the announcement. We had the Gatorade Track and Field Female Athlete of the Year. Now, the Male Athlete of the Year has been announced. I'll tell you who it is next.
Tutel and Nuanez, live on the stream at 1029ESPN.com.
This is Mike Nugent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Berkshire Hathaway provides Western Montana with full-time real estate professionals for you whenever you need us. Our reputation as the state's most knowledgeable and available real estate group has helped build unmatched trust in the Garden City and statewide. If you have been thinking of making a real estate move in the short or long term, give me a call. No pressure, no expectations. Just professional opinions and service at whatever pace you are comfortable with. Give me, Mike Nugent, a call today, 531-1802. And remember, every question is good to ask.
Hey there, Colter Nuanez from Tutel Nuanez 1029 ESPN Missoula, here with Tom from Aspen Sound. Tom got me a great deal on an automatic car starter this winter. Now it's summer. What sort of stuff you guys got going on down there, Tom?
Well, Colter, coming into the summertime, we're picking up on the window tinting front. So if you need your windows tinted, give us a call. We'll get you scheduled up. Boats and ATVs are starting to come in full swing, and we're also starting to see the hot rods come out to play. Anything audio related, let us know. We'll get you taken care of.
Feel the music at Aspen Sound.
Hey folks, Ryan Tutel here, and I'm with Josh from the Advocates Injury Attorneys. Josh, if our listeners have been injured in an accident, how can you help?
We're here to help you after a car accident by negotiating with insurance companies, recovering lost wages if you have any, and even getting you into a rental car if you need one. Call us today for a free consultation, and we'll get started helping you right away.
If you need help, get a hold of the Advocates. Call Josh at 640-4444 or online at montanaadvocates.com. You deserve an advocate.
The splash of launching a new boat. The quiet of a favorite campsite. The noisy fun of a family barbecue on your new deck. Whatever summer sounds like to you, make it happen with a personal loan from Farmers State Bank. 9 locations to serve you, or start the loan application process online at farmersebank.com. Farmers State Bank, your Montana bank since 1907. An equal housing lender and member FDIC.
Everybody knows that high school sports generate suspense, excitement, and drama.
They also generate higher grade point averages, stronger work habits, and greater self-esteem.
Everybody knows that high school sports give us more value for our entertainment dollar.
They also give us leaders committed to strengthening communities right here in Montana. The true value of playing sports in school can't be measured in wins and losses or dollars and cents. Studies show that participation in sports, along with other extracurricular activities, is one of the best ways to teach leadership, cooperation, accountability, and other invaluable life skills. Don't just stand on the sidelines. Encourage the young people you know to get in the game. When you do, you'll be helping them get ahead in life. High school sports, a winning part of a complete education. This message presented by the Montana High School Association and the Montana Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
Tutel and Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio for Missoula.
What if you were a quarterback and a jab thrower and really good at both? What would you do? It's Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. We are broadcasting live. Well, should I let Cutler tell him?
Let's do it.
Available thanks to Opportunity Bank, your local bank, your opportunity. Now for the Kurtz Polaris studio, here is Ryan Tutel and Colter Nuanez.
Thanks, Cutler. Appreciate that. I didn't know it was going to cut the music off. That is my bad. I don't know how these things work. You said in this most recent messenger transaction that computers are hard. And they are. Or maybe it was Reese who said it. I don't know.
You're so good at this.
Broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios, as mentioned. Online, Facebook/ESPN Missoula, SkylineSportsMT.com. It is now time for our Prep Extra segment. It is brought to us by the Farmer State Bank. Farmer State Bank. Check out the My Card app. It happens to everyone. You walk off, you leave your debit card in a restaurant, the grocery store. If you lose your purse or wallet anywhere, it doesn't matter. Get the My Card app. You can shut off your debit card right from your phone. Safe, secure, instant. Get that from Farmer State Bank. Coulter, let's talk about the Gatorade Track and Field Athlete of the Year on the boys' side. It is Montana State football commit Rylan Ort, who threw up and over 208 feet, but at two different times was in the top 6 in the nation with throws of the javelin that he had, and set a record at the state meet for the season, and won the state championship in a javelin throw. An outstanding season all the way around, and obviously coming through as a state champion. He's been in kind of a rivalry in the javelin throw, and he came out on top, and this is his senior year.
The Gatorade Track Athletes of the Year for both boys and girls, javelin throwers. Angelica Street from Columbia Falls, Rylan Ort from Missoula Sentinel. The Rylan Ort saga is just, it's such a compelling one to me, because Rylan Ort, who's been on this show in this studio multiple times, said to us, hey, I'm a team sport guy. I grew up playing football and basketball. My whole athletic goals were to play college football. And he was a great high school quarterback, a great high school player, period. I think he has a good chance to be a pretty decent college football player as well. He didn't start doing track till he was a freshman in high school.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, by the time he's a junior in high school, he's elite on the state level. And by the time he's a senior in high school, he is elite on a national level.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, you're the Gatorade Track Athlete of the Year, and that just, it only amps up the recruiting.
Totally.
And I get where he's coming from in his love for and the opportunity to play college football. And I also think that there's not a lot of money available in track and field, no matter how elite you are. And so it was definitely a decision for him and his family to make. And you got to have all respect for that. But I also think it would be, to a certain extent, sort of tragic if Rylan Ort never threw the javelin again, because, again, he is epically talented at it. He threatened the all-class Montana record this year at the state meet. I mean, he put on a straight show a couple of times. I mean, you're talking hucking this thing 210. I mean, that's competitive on the college level, and you're still in high school. It would just be unfortunate, I guess, if he never threw it again. But I don't think the door is shut on it either. I do think that he's a chance to maybe do both. The thing about javelin is it's an outdoor-only sport. So while they do a lot of indoor training, you might be able to just do football, do winter conditioning, and then maybe go throw during the outdoor season.
Yep.
Who knows? But regardless, we're not here to debate Rylan Ort's future choices as much as to give the kid a ton of credit. I think it's just very interesting that the Gatorade Athletes of the Year were both one-event athletes, javelin throwers. But on the other hand, these two young people were in the top 5 in the nation in their events, so justifiable.
It's interesting. It makes all the sense, doesn't it, that, a kid who's playing quarterback on one hand and would be a good jav thrower and vice versa. But the mentality that you have to enjoy, to want to be, to love being an athlete in an individual sport is very different than what it is to be that in a team sport. And recognizing that track and field is a team sport in a respect. But, I mean, you're out there doing your thing, right? I mean, when the President's Cup golf tournament comes around, all of a sudden you got teams and you're playing for each other, and there's the camaraderie that comes with it. But at the end of the day, go up and hit the golf ball. At the end of the day, go up and throw the javelin. Like, you want to help your team, do what you do by yourself the best that you can do it. And in the tradition, quote-unquote, team sports, where you're all out there trying to achieve the same goal together at the same time on the same surface, it's just a whole different aspect. And if you are a leader, if you are there's a very I'm being very restrictive in saying that. There's plenty of people who are great leaders that are playing individual sports, but the mentality that goes into wanting to be part of that unit, whether it's football, whether it's basketball, whatever it might be, to go out there and do that together is different. And if a guy...
I mean, all for one for all. I mean, football's the greatest team sport in the world. It just is.
And we've talked to Rylan Ort enough to say, like, he loves football. He wants to play football. He wants to be out there with the guys doing the thing together. And maybe it's also the physicality of the sport, which pretty clearly isn't there, in track and field and these sorts of things. It could be a lot of different things, but it's a whole different mindset. And, like, because you have, maybe a propensity that's so very obvious, and being that, the best in the state at a particular thing and really one of the best in the nation, if you are more invested in yourself into another thing, then who can say, well, you shouldn't do that, and you're not saying that. I'm not saying you are, but I'm just saying you just have to respect the way that people are. That said, at high school, you also, when you and I were 17 to 18 years old, when we look back now, we were like, well, I made a lot of choices that I think were good choices that directed where I would go, and I'm happy that I did that. And then maybe there was a couple who was like, well, what if I would have done this? What would that have been like? And, who can know? You got to make the choice that you got to make at that moment.
If you play football right out the gates, there's always going to be track. If you go do track, football's dead.
It's fair.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
Two other things worth mentioning in this Prep Extra before we wrap up. We did so much on recruiting in the first 45 minutes. If you missed that, check it out. Tutel Nuanez podcast, 102.9 ESPN Missoula, as well as all the various podcast apps. But Troy Yates, younger brother of Tucker Yates, is committed to to Montana State University. He was at individual camp at MSU over the weekend, and he gave his verbal commit. So he's one of the better players in the state of Montana. He is how do you say this? He's cut out of the same cloth as his brother. Not nearly as stout. Trey Yates goes about 6'1", 235, which is very large for a high school kid, but he ain't 6 foot 290 like old Tucker was. But it's a good get for Montana State.
Well, not yet.
Well, you ever see Tucker Yates in high school?
I don't know.
Tucker Yates, it's like my old man used to say, if Tucker Yates was 2 inches taller, he'd be perfectly round. Trey Yates is a little bit more spelt. But no surprise that he's a state champion wrestler, as that's the
thing. Here's the other thing. If you can get the best football player in the state, good for you. Also, if you can get the best heavyweight wrestler in the state to come play football for you, mark it.
This is what I'm saying.
Mark it.
This is what I'm saying. These recruiters complicate things too much. Give me the heavyweight champion at all the class levels in all the rural states. I'll take the heavyweight champion from Washington, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana. Give it to me. Let's go. He knows how to get low. He knows how to play with good pad level. He's tough.
Correct.
Let's go. I'll take him all day. The other one, this is breaking news in the last 20 minutes. Lexi Deedon, Missoula Sentinel product, has committed to Montana State.
Okay.
Not Montana. Lexi Deedon, the daughter of Karen Deedon, head coach at Missoula Sentinel. Karen Deedon, a all-time great at the University of Washington, but coaching here in Missoula for it got to be 15 plus years now.
Oh yeah, long time.
Since I was in high school for sure.
She's got to be. She certainly is one of the, if not the longest tenured girls high school.
I had one of the great coaches. Great coach,
absolutely.
But her daughter going to Montana State to play for Tricia Benford.
Wow. Okay, that is an interesting piece of news. We will need to look further on that. It is Tutel Nuanez. This has been the Prep Extra segment brought to us by Farmers State Bank. Farmers State Bank, your Montana bank since 1907. Hour 1 in the books. Hour 2 straight ahead. University of Montana basketball. Raleigh Worcester in an interesting conundrum, not unlike that of Rylan Ort. Also, Tony Miller's transfer. Rashi Wortham no longer on the staff. And who knows? Maybe we get into Michigan v. Vanderbilt in the College World Series. All of it coming up next hour.
Carl Tyler's Missoula Volkswagen wants to help you celebrate Independence Day with a new SUV. Save now at Carl Tyler's Missoula Volkswagen. The Volkswagen Atlas has all your road trip needs covered with a 6-year, 72,000-mile bumper-to-bumper factory-limited warranty, along with the Missoula Volkswagen Forever Powertrain warranty. You can focus on your vacation with worry-free ownership. View our full inventory at MissoulaVW.com or stop by 3665 North Reserve Street today. Carl Tyler's Missoula Volkswagen.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River.
We ate a lot of steaks before we came up with the Montana Club's Private Reserve Cut Angus. It's as good a steak as you're going to get. Our Private Reserve Cut Angus is specially cut for us. And with our custom seasoning, it has a flavor that's absolutely incomparable. We're confident that it will satisfy the most discriminating steak customer for an unrivaled steak experience. Real Montana, real food. The Montana Club on Brooks and North Reserve, Missoula.
Les Schwab is proud to introduce two of our best tires ever just in time for summer. There's our exclusive open range AT that we believe is our quietest, smoothest, and best all-season traction tire ever, or the Reputation, our exclusive high-mileage premium passenger tire. Get $50 off alignment when you purchase a set of 4 open range AT or Reputation tires. Book an appointment today at leschwab.com. Les Schwab Tires. Doing the right thing matters. Cannot be combined with other offers. Limited time only. See details at leschwab.com.
On Russell, across from the fairgrounds.
No matter how far you may go, there's always one just down the road. Town Pump, who pump it up, pump it up.
What goes perfectly with a crisp and delicious salad? Energy drinks, of course. At Town Pump, you can grab your Bang and Rain 16-ounce energy drinks, 2 for $4. And don't forget your greens with a chef salad in the deli, only $4.49. Town Pump Food Stores, proud to be part of our community.
Town Pump, right down the road, pump it up, oh yeah.
Hey folks, Ryan Tutel here, and I'm with Josh of the Advocates Injury Attorneys. Josh, what are people left dealing with after an accident?
Well, quite a few things, actually. We see people that are in pain, they still need to get to work, they need to raise their kids, and now they have to take time to go see doctors and other healthcare providers. They're frustrated with working with the insurance companies and getting the runaround. We'll take on the burden of dealing with the insurance companies so you can get the best settlement possible and get back to your life.
Find your advocate online at montanaadvocates.com. There are a lot of lawyers. You deserve an advocate.
ESPN Radio for Western Montana. KKVU HD3 Stevensville and 102.9 FM on K275BS Missoula. ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good afternoon. Ryan Tutel, Colton Nuanez, 109 ESPN Sports Center. Carson Rostad has committed to the Montana Grizzlies. Rostad, the 2018 Montana Gatorade Player of the Year from Hamilton, gave his verbal commitment to sign with Montana for the class of 2020 over the weekend. He's 6'3", 205 pounds, quarterback. He's widely considered the top prospect in the state. He chose the Grizzlies over an offer from Montana State. As a junior, Rostad threw for 2,794 yards and 43 touchdowns, while rushing for 694 yards and 10 more scores, helping the Bronx to the Class A state title game for the second straight year. Rostad is also the maternal cousin of former Grizz All-American linebacker Jordan Tripp.
Missoula Sentinel senior Rylan Ort is the Montana Gatorade Track and Field Athlete of the Year. The three-sport athlete, who's set to play football at Montana State next season, dazzled the Treasure State with his booming throws in the javelin all spring. Ort twice broke into the top 6 in the nation in the jav, including threatening the all-class record with a heave of 208 feet 8 inches at the Class AA State Championship meet in Kalispell.
Montana State received a commitment from pole strip standout Trey Yates over the weekend. The younger brother of former Montana State captain Tucker Yates gave his commitment at Montana State's individual camp. He's the reigning Class BC heavyweight wrestling champ.
And finally, Montana State former standout Tyler Hall. He's headed to the Summer League with the Chicago Bulls.
What we call this is Coulter Heavy. It is Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris Studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula, Highway 83 in Sealy, online at kurtzpolaris.com. If you missed anything in the first hour, and a great first hour it was, just like every other first hour we've ever done, Check it out on the podcast. The podcast is available on the TuneIn Radio app and on iTunes and on Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts. The Two Tell Nuanez podcast can be subscribed to, rated, reviewed. We'd appreciate it if you do all that. Go listen there on the podcast. Easy to consume, enjoyable for all. The podcast is available thanks to the Wingate by Wyndham Hotel. If you want to call, 329-1899. The phone number. All guests join us via the Rankish Brothers RV phone line. Coulter, we did high school / football primarily in the first hour. Now we got some University of Montana basketball news, and it is kind of bouncing all over the place here. We can start with, well, whatever you want to start with. Raleigh Wooster we got to talk about, Tony Miller, Rashi Wortham. So however you want to sort of weave all of this together, because it's multiple strands of what is ultimately the same story, that being Grizz men's basketball.
I think that the Raleigh Wooster is the most newsworthy and most statewide of the elements. So let's talk about that first. Raleigh Wooster committed to the University of Montana heading into his sophomore year of high school. To my knowledge and to all the people that I have talked to, that was the earliest both offer and commit in the history of Grizz basketball. And I think a lot of this stemmed from the fact that Raleigh Wooster, he's a gym rat. He plays all over town. I know he plays in multiple pickup games at multiple of the, kind of standard gyms in Missoula. And I know that a lot of the Grizz coaches play there too. And I know that there's a lot of high-level competition. And I think that Raleigh got himself noticed by the right people very early on. And then he went out and proved it and was a first-team All-State guy as a sophomore. And then all of a sudden, he's this in hometown early commit. And it was a great story. And I don't necessarily think the story's over. But I do think, we've had him in the studio on the show. And he's expressed his affection for the University of Montana, his respect and excitement about the University of Montana men's basketball team. There's been a couple things that have happened here. First of all, I don't think you could ever blame a kid for weighing his options. And when Raleigh Wooster was going into his sophomore year, he had one option.
15 years old.
I mean, he had one option. And that's not to say that he wasn't a D1 guy at that point, because he was. He was getting offered by the defending Big Sky Conference champion, so he's obviously a legitimate recruit. But he hadn't really gotten seen by very many other people.
Right.
So I think his options are growing a little bit. I think that also the fact that he's a Hellgate guy, I think that makes a natural connection with him, Jeff Hayes, Trace Tinkle, Wayne Tinkle. So who knows if Oregon State's somehow in the mix now. I mean, Raleigh Wooster was excellent last year, outstanding. Maybe a borderline Pac-12 guy. I'm not sure. I think he's a very interesting analysis as a recruit, because I do think that he's a good athlete. He's not an exceptional athlete. He's an exceptional basketball player. He's got great pace. He's got great vision. He doesn't rush. He's got great skill. He can shoot it.
I don't know that I've seen a high school basketball player that has the basketball acumen that he
His
has.
IQ is so high.
Yes, it is.
He never gets sped up. But he's also not leaning on you in the lane. I mean, Trace Tinkle, when you saw him, you're like, well, wow. I mean, that guy's 6'8". He can jump. He's fluid. Harken back to my days in high school. I mean, Jack McGillis was unbelievable. I mean, he was straight two-hand dunking in the lane multiple times a game. You're not going to see Raleigh Wooster, Russell Westbrook, anybody. But you will see him Kyrie Irving some people, where he puts you on a string and lulls you to sleep, and then he's gone.
If he's going to do one of those two, I mean, it's pretty good.
No doubt. No doubt. But, I also think that this time of year, the club circuit is heating up. So now all of a sudden you got some other people in your ear. But then the last factor here is that Raleigh Wooster was not a football prospect by any means on anybody's list anywhere until last year. And then last year he was a first-team All-State guy, and I think he's one of the top 10 or 15 football recruits in the state too. And I know he's getting recruited by both Montana and Montana State in football as well. So, and the last thing that's going to cause a ton of speculation is I know that Raleigh Wooster has played on the I don't know if it's still called the Northwest All-Stars, but it was called the Northwest All-Stars for years. It's a club team that's an all-star team of a collection of Eastern Washington, Idaho, and Montana guys. Sometimes some Wyoming guys are spliced in there. Basketball, club team. But I know he's played on that with Caleb Bellich, among others. Caleb Bellich, Manhattan Christian standout, probably the best player in the state this last year as a senior. He's headed to did I say Montana State standout? He's a Manhattan Christian standout who's headed to Montana State.
Right, yes.
But I know those two are friends. And when Raleigh Worcester decommitted from the University of Montana men's basketball team over the weekend, Caleb Bellich quote tweeted it and said, "Big things ahead for my boy," with the bug eye emoji that all the kids use now for like, watch out, like big things coming. And so you wonder if Danny Sprinkle gets in the mix, if Montana State's in the mix. So there's a lot of open-ended stuff this is all pure speculation. We have not talked to Raleigh. This stuff is broken not even 48 hours ago. So we really have no definitive information. All the definitive information I can tell you is Raleigh Worcester is no longer committed to the University of Montana men's basketball team. There's likely a variety of reasons for that. And I know for a fact he's getting recruited both in basketball by Montana and Montana State, and in football by Montana and Montana State.
Yeah, I mean, when you commit that early, we talked before about how, in the case of maybe somebody like Carson Rostad, you land on everybody's radar so quickly, and people are so impressed with you so early on, and then that gives them also time to go full circle and start to deconstruct you as a player and what do you maybe not do as well and start to critique a little bit. Well, guess what? When you've committed to someplace so early on, in your high school playing days and at such a young age, when all of a sudden more doors start to open, then you go, well, wow, did I just go out there and leap at the first thing that I saw? I have no idea, as you said, what the impetus for this was, but you can imagine some of those options as opportunities happening. I would also say this. Now, this is going to, because it's in the context that it's in, is going to sound as if it isn't, a possible, maybe plausible explanation. I don't mean it to be that at all. I'm simply stating this as what I would guess to be a fact, and that is, team-wise, what is the best moment of Raleigh Worcester's life?
He told us this in studio when Hellgate won a game.
Winning a football game at Hellgate High School, which was probably, by the way, the best moment of any team sport anywhere, winning any state championship. Hellgate winning and breaking the 0-for streak. In fact, not even having a team going back 3 years at Hellgate High School to win that game, and the classmates and people rushing the field for a regular season football game that Hellgate finally went out there and won. By the way, backed it up with another one the next week. Has got to be. It's a moment that cannot be replicated because you can't replicate the losses that backed up and the embarrassment and all of those things and the weight that was on that was finally off of the shoulders of those kids, and Raleigh Worcester being the linchpin of that victory of that team and all of that. And again, I have no idea if that is influential in this at all, but guess what? At basketball, you know what he's experienced? A lot of heartache at Hellgate. They've been a great team, an odds-on favorite to win the whole thing.
They lost the state championship on a buzzer beater.
They lost
last
in the first round of the state championship 2 years ago, and they lose on a full court, 4 seconds to go. Miracle by Bozeman on the last play of the state championship game this year. And, again, I wouldn't think that you would sit here and go, well, obviously, then football's the way to go. I'm not saying that at all. But the fact of the matter is the best moment that you could possibly have happened on the gridiron of all things. That said, as you and I sort of discussed in relation to Ryland Ort, Raleigh Worcester is a special basketball talent. I haven't seen him play football. I haven't seen it. So I'm not saying I'm sure he's a great football player. He probably is a great athlete, but the acumen and the IQ and the gift that he has to play basketball beyond the physical talents that are there is unique. It is unique. And it wouldn't. It seems to me that to recognize that and pursue that, because not everybody has that.
Watching him play basketball, I haven't watched him play football either.
Right.
Watching him play basketball, the fact that he plays safety in football, I imagine that his football game is very, it mirrors his basketball game in the being a step ahead, seeing it, being able to dissect it. But having been in journalism for a while now, so many people ask me, who do you root for? What do you root for? And I truly don't really root for anybody or anything hardly ever at all. Pro sports, sometimes I find myself pulling for one side or the other, but rarely ever do I watch a game with a full rooting interest. I just root for good stories. But I also do root for the kids. And the one thing that I've always thought is I just want the kids to make the right decision for themselves. And who am I to say what's the right decision for an individual? You never know. But just broadly and on a baseline level, when you can throw the javelin 210 feet, you should just keep throwing the javelin at some level. You should figure out a way to do it even if you do play football as well. Just like if you are a Division I basketball recruit, if you can get a Division I scholarship in basketball, that's way better than being able to get a partial scholarship at the FCS level for football. It just is. There's a lot of allure and pizzazz and pedigree and prestige and history attached to the University of Montana football program. If you're a Missoula native, you've been to Grizz games. It's cool. It's as cool as it gets. It's one of the coolest experience. It's one of the coolest entertainment events you can go to in the state of Montana, bar none. Period. No doubt.
Until you and I go on our bar tour around town and do live shows, in which case that will be the new best experience you can have as a matter of first-person entertainment.
Are you letting me do an impromptu promo right here?
I mean, I'm just saying.
We got these Winmer Brothers promos that you guys have all been hearing. We do have 8 locations secured, so stay tuned for that. There's already registration boxes out. If you want to go to the Grizz game at the University of Oregon, September 14th, hit up the press box. You can hit up locals only. You can hit up Paradise Falls. Go check them out.
And we'll have a handful more coming.
Handful more. We got the boxes getting delivered tomorrow.
Bunches of pairs of tickets. I mean, this is unbelievable.
20 pairs of tickets. Go look for that Winmer Brothers Hefeweizen box with the Grizz ticket giveaway logo on top of it.
There you go. And then come to
Stockman's Bar
is the day that we're there, and you will get, we'll be giving away tickets live, and also it will be, the greatest entertainment that you could have.
The Iron Horse has a box. Stockman's Bar will have a box tomorrow, so stay tuned for all that. But regardless, what do I root for? I root for the kids to make the decision that's going to help them be the best that they can be. I've been talking about this one for 10 years. But there's nothing that I thought was more frustrating than when Chris Wilson from Great Falls CMR ran the second fastest 200-meter time in the country. That is the most untouchable record in the state of Montana. There's nobody that's going to get within a second of that record. That is the most untouchable record in the history of the state of Montana. Chris Wilson was flirting with Olympic times when he was 18 years old in Great Falls, Montana, and he goes and takes a partial scholarship to go play football at Montana State and then blows out his shoulder a couple times and gets completely behind training-wise. He still comes back and wins, I think, 5 or 6 Big Sky championships in the sprints for the Cats after he quit football. But this guy could have been a straight Olympian. I mean, he could have been the cream of the absolute crop on the world stage in the 200, and he chose the allure of football. And, good for him. But that kind of stuff drives me crazy. Because, again, you could have been elite on the world stage. So, regardless, I think that there's I think the best thing you can say about Raleigh Wooster is he's got options. And I trust that he will make the decision that's best for him. But it is very interesting that this could be a recruiting battle that includes the Bobcats in both football and basketball, which I think that no one really thought was going to be in the mix at all. And also could include the University of Montana football team.
It's Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. Got to get out. Got to come back. Tony Miller, Rashi Wortham, Michigan versus Vanderbilt, the E.B. Craney Awards, Tyler Hall, the Osprey. Can we get it all in? No chance.
Carl Tyler's Missoula Volkswagen wants to help you celebrate Independence Day with a new SUV. Save now at Carl Tyler's Missoula Volkswagen. The Volkswagen Atlas has all your road trip needs covered with a 6-year, 72,000-mile bumper-to-bumper factory limited warranty, along with the Missoula Volkswagen Forever Powertrain warranty. You can focus on your vacation with worry-free ownership. View our full inventory at MissoulaVW.com or stop by 3665 North Reserve Street today. Carl Tyler's Missoula Volkswagen.
Alpine Touch has mastered keeping your taste buds happy by spicing up anything you throw on the grill this summer. Now, let Alpine Touch keep your mouth watering whenever you want their new sunflower shooters. Their new jumbo sunflower seeds seasoned with Alpine Touch's world-famous all-purpose seasonings. And Alpine Touch sunflower shooters will be available all summer at every Osprey baseball home game. Available at retail locations around the state and online at alpinetouch.com. Alpine Touch, Montana's special spice.
Hey folks, Ryan Tutel here with Josh from The Advocates. If you've been in a car accident and need help dealing with the insurance company, you should give The Advocates a call.
It doesn't cost anything at all to call, and I'd be happy to talk with you about your situation. You don't want to have to be dealing with contacting the insurance companies and setting up your claim. We can do that for you from start to finish. We'll take the hassle out of the process so you can just focus on getting better.
There you go, folks. If you've been injured in an accident, give Josh a call, 640-4444, or online at montanaadvocates.com. There are a lot of lawyers, but you deserve an advocate.
No matter how far you may go, there's always one just down the road. Town Pump, who pump it up, pump it up.
Looking for a sweet summer deal? You'll find them at your local Town Pump. Right now, buy any size fountain drink for only $1. Grab a delicious corn dog while you're at it. 2 for $2.22. Town Pump Food Stores. Proud to be part of our community.
Town Pump, right down the road, pump it up, oh yeah.
This is Mike Nugent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Berkshire Hathaway provides Western Montana with full-time real estate professionals for you whenever you need us. Our reputation as the state's most knowledgeable and available real estate group has helped build unmatched trust in the Garden City and statewide. If you have been thinking of making a real estate move in the short or long term, give me a call. No pressure, no expectations. Just professional opinions and service at whatever pace you are comfortable with. Give me, Mike Nugent, a call today, 531-1802. And remember, every question is good to ask.
When you need a bank to help ramp up your savings strategy, look to your local bank, Opportunity Bank of Montana. Build confidence in your financial future when you create a rainy day cushion or take care of the nest egg you already have. Opportunity Bank offers options from basic savings to money market accounts and certificates with competitive rates. There's nothing like the feeling of progress, so let's get started today. Come see us at Opportunity Bank of Montana. OpportunityBank.com. Member FDIC.
ESPN Missoula Sports Center.
Good afternoon, Ryan Tutel, Colter Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Sports Center. Carson Rostad has committed to the Montana Grizzlies. Rostad, the 2018 Montana Gatorade Player of the Year from Hamilton in football, gave his verbal commitment to sign with Montana for the class of 2020 over the weekend. The 6'3", 205-pound quarterback is widely considered the top prospect in the state of Montana. He chose the Grizzlies over an offer from MSU. As a junior, Rostad threw for almost 2,800 yards and 43 touchdowns, while rushing for nearly 700 more yards and 10 scores, helping the Bronx to the Class A state title game for a second straight season. Rostad is the maternal cousin of former Grizz All-American linebacker Jordan Tripp.
Woo!
There it is.
Several pieces of Montana State news. First of all, Missoula Sentinel senior Rylan Ort, the Montana Gatorade Track and Field Athlete of the Year. He is set to play football at Montana State next year. He almost broke the all-class record with a throw of 208 feet, 8 inches in the javelin to claim the state championship. Also, Lexi Deeden, Sentinel standout basketball player, has committed to Montana State for the 2020-2021 season. And finally, Montana State former standout Tyler Hall headed to the Summer League with the Chicago Bulls.
Kevin LaChance had a grand slam home run in the bottom of the 7th inning last night to lift the Missoula Osprey to a 7-4 win over Great Falls. They took 2 out of 3 from the Voyagers in their first homestand of the season. Tonight, they welcome Billings. I really don't care what we talk about, Colter. It's yours. Tutel Nuanez, 102.9 ESPN Radio. Broadcasting live from the Kurtz Polaris studios. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway and Missoula Highway 83, and see me online at kurtzpolaris.com. You can listen to us on the World Wide Web live via the stream. The stream is available thanks to Opportunity Bank. Your local bank, your opportunity.
Let's get through a couple of the pieces of news, and then maybe we can have a little bit more of a debate about Grizz basketball.
That sounds great.
Tony Miller, like we said in the Sports Center last week, Tony Miller was a former Great Northwest Athletic Conference Freshman of the Year who sat out last year at Montana after transferring from Seattle Pacific. He is on the move again. I confirmed last week that he has entered the NCAA transfer portal, which means that he's out. So if he goes to another Division I school, he's going to have to sit out again, which is interesting. I'm wondering if he goes back to Division II, but that would seem like a weird move. I heard from a couple pretty good sources over the weekend that he's going to transfer to Gonzaga, which I don't really know how he would climb that high without having any D1 tape. But at this time of year, or I guess in this place in our world, nothing surprises me. Mm-hmm. Nothing. We've seen, I mean, DeMonte King from Montana State went and transferred to a junior college and then was a 3-year starter at Arizona State. I thought he was okay at Montana State. He was a all Pac-12 player. You know, I would believe anything at this point.
I mean, you and I are here doing this. My daughter's probably going to play professional basketball. So, I mean, that's, you know, anything can
I think
happen.
that a couple of your kids maybe have some potential in sports. I do not think that your daughters are going to be basketball players.
Oh, it's going to be tag team octagon is what my kids are
I
going
mean,
to be
your
into.
kids are
I mean,
athletic and coordinated and stuff, but they also are
furious
and short.
Yeah.
I mean what's the over-under for Alethea and Zoe's max height? 5'3"?
I mean, Alethea could see 5'3". Zoe, if she hits 5 foot, will be a dang miracle.
Yeah. No, she's no way. She's
bless her heart.
4'10".
Yeah. We might have to
gymnastics.
Yeah.
Theater.
I think some theater. I think
comedy,
some poetry. I think there's a good chance. Yeah, we got the kids' charades happening in the household. Zoe incredulous that nobody could figure out that her clapping her hands together was playing ping pong. You're all idiots was the shorthand version of what she said to us. How come you can't figure this out? I was very proud that she just shifted all the blame on anyone being unable to guess what she was onto the guessers rather than accepting anything on herself. I saw myself in her very clearly at that moment.
You went to almost every University of Montana men's basketball practice with me.
Yeah,
our entire impression of Tony Miller is at practice.
Yep.
What did you think of him, and I guess how big of a loss is this for Montana? I thought he was good.
I thought he was good. I never think that it's a loss if a guy hasn't played, because literally there is no loss.
But when there are a transfer sitting out,
if you're expecting
that's an expected almost certain rotation player, right?
Absolutely. And so in that respect, it absolutely is a loss. And I mean, it's surprising to me. I mean, when you have gone through the rigmarole of transferring from where you were, and by the way, very good, obviously a freshman of the year in the conference that he was in,
and obviously clearly a higher level talent, because he had multiple offers to transfer D1. That almost never happens unless you're exceptional for your level.
So then to come and do what you need to do to sit out a year and go through all the practices and everything else and be there, only then to transfer again is it just raises. It's not without explanation. I'll put it like that. And while we don't know what that explanation is, there certainly is one. And it may have nothing to do with basketball. It might have everything to do with basketball. We just don't know. But it certainly is an eyebrow raiser where you sit here and go, well, you know, you wouldn't even sit here and play one game and do one season when you'd already put in the time. And, you know, I think where he ends up going, Tony Miller, will go a long way in either explaining it or maybe just raising more questions. Like if he transfers quote unquote laterally, you would go, well, what in the world is going on? If he transfers either up or down, if he goes to, you know, as you said, well, perhaps Gonzaga or perhaps, you know, to a Division II school or whatever, then you go, okay, well, maybe there's some sense to be made of it. Maybe you want to be closer to home. I don't know. But right now, it certainly is, a significant question to me of what the basis of that was. Maybe it's personal. Maybe it's basketball. Maybe it's other. I have no idea.
I mean, the fact that he will be moving to his third school in as many years is interesting. He's from Woodinville, so he's from Western Washington.
Mm-hmm.
The other piece of news we got to get through is Rasheed Wortham is moving on from the University of Montana. He's been here for 3 years. And again, I don't want to be the speculation monger here whatsoever. You just have to wonder. I mean, as we know, Rasheed's a Tacoma guy. He's a Western Washington guy. Travis DeCuire has tremendous Western Washington ties as well, being a Seattle native. But Rasheed was sort of the how do you say it? The pillar. He was kind of the lifeline for a lot of the Tacoma area guys. He's kind of the connection back home. And so you just wonder if those two things have anything to do with each other. I have no idea if they do. I'm not saying that they do. I'm just saying the fact that Rasheed is moving on and that Tony Miller is moving on. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
maybe they resurface together somewhere.
It's the time of year that this sort of thing happens, and until we find out where and maybe more of the circumstances surrounding it, then that's just what it is. It's just a brute fact that has no full explanation or even really partial explanation at this very present moment.
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
Saeed Pridgett has been sort of a Swiss Army knife type front court player.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you necessarily call him a traditional post.
I do. You don't.
Right. So when you look at the Grizz program, you have Fabian Krizlovic, who played 4 years for Travis DeCuire.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody else. Martin Bruning was an inherited player who played 2 years. Jamar Coe was an inherited player who sat out for a year and then played essentially a season and a half.
Well, he wasn't inherited. I mean, he was.
No, he's a Travis DeCuire recruit. You're right.
Yeah.
But Jamar basically was. You could call his time under Coach DeCuire 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Other than that, there has not been any big man that's lasted more than 2 years during the 5 seasons that DeCuire has been at the helm.
Well,
I'm not trying to say one thing correlates to the other. I guess my question for you is, at what point does this hurt Montana? Because they've had so much turnover. A lot of it has been just sort of bottom of the roster guys to fill the roster. Admir Besovic, I just don't really know if he was ever going to really contribute much at all, right? It's not a huge loss. Ben Carter, I mean, he just
Kelby Kramer.
They're just not really that. They're not D1 guys. You take a flyer on a guy who's 6'10", like Kelby Kramer. You take a flyer on a guy like Admir Besovic, who's 7 feet, and then when you see him, and you're like, okay, the acceleration is just not really there. They're not that. They're just not good enough. But then you also have on the other side guys like Tony Miller, who we both thought was pretty darn good.
Yep.
Carl Nicholas, who was certainly really good. I mean, very, very talented.
Donovan Dorsey.
Declining to return. So, I guess the question of why, I think, is an impossible one to answer, and I don't think we should even waste our time sitting here and blathering about it. I want to ask you just completely logistically, completely roster construction-wise. This hurts Montana, right? I mean, I think that the knock on Montana has been that they haven't been able to really throw the ball into the post and get a bucket, except for when Jamar Coe was healthy. When he was healthy, they played completely through him, but it just seems like this balancing act seems to be going the balancing way of backcourt guys and not front court guys. It just seems like they're having such a hard time keeping big guys.
Well, I'm not sure I'm on that with you, and the reason is as follows. First of all, Broinig and Krizlovic played out their time at the University of Montana, so their time with DeCuire was merely incidental to Travis DeCuire's arrival at the University of Montana.
And they came to play for a great big man coach.
And Donovan Dorsey, isn't really a big man in the post sense. Neither is Saeed Pridgett. Jamar Coe was a great get, and he played out his time with obviously some injury issues and so forth last year. And so there's that. The other guys, the true big men that have left, you're right, is like, well, what, is it a significant loss? Tony Miller is a loss, right? I don't know what impact or even what role he would have played on this Montana team next year, but presumably he would have. But then you still have Mac Anderson, right? He comes in. He's the, presumptive big guy, center, paint presence on this team. He was better than I expected him to be, quite frankly, as a freshman, and I think has a huge upside.
Huge.
And is just
huge upside.
And is just a sophomore, and
he might actually have as much upside as any player in the league.
Yes. I mean, what he is athletically, his footwork and all that, and he's just going to progress. And so he's still there. And is he today, an all-conference type of post player? Probably not, but he's on his way. The trajectory is headed in that direction. And so I don't think about this in terms of, is the orientation, and by the way, it certainly is a guard-oriented system that Travis DeCuire has wanted to and has implemented. There's no doubt about that. Not only is that's explicitly stated by Travis DeCuire, repeatedly, and that's fine. And I think that's good. Clearly, it has worked. And so, does that mean that the big guys have been secondary in the system and thus harder to retain? I don't think I'm seeing the evidence of that as of yet. Also, the turnover that has happened now, where you talk about Coral Nicholas a year ago, he's the one guy that you would point to and go, he's the big guy that left before his time was up that would have been a hugely impactful player on this basketball team had he stayed, presumably. That happens. And we don't know all the reasons for that. He went to Stephen F. Austin, and if I'm not mistaken, is he still at Stephen F. Austin?
I don't know. It was in flux.
Okay. So, but anyway, point being, we don't know all the reasons, we don't know all the whys, and sometimes it's just not the right fit. The other thing is, and you can think this is great or awful or, whatever, but it is a fact. Basically, you're at a 50% roster turnover year in and year out across the board nationwide Division I college basketball. Period. That's what you're doing. Kids are coming. Kids are going. The recruiting of, we're going to get the high schooler in here. We're going to bring them up. They're going to, red shirt. They're going to sit out their freshman year, and then they'll start getting time as their sophomore year and hopefully start as juniors and seniors. That is gone. That hasn't been the way for a long, long time. And with the particularly institution of the transfer portal, which now gives all of the control to the player in terms of dictating their exit if they want to have one, you are seeing kids leaving all the time. And all of these guys, all of the coaches are into the transfer portal, not for their guys that are leaving, but for the other 350 basketball teams at the Division I level of their guys leaving. And they're texting immediately saying, hey, if you're out at Belmont, would you like to think about the University of Montana? Would you like to think about Montana State? So they're there recruiting in this way just as much, if not more so, than they are at the high school level. And also guys are leaving their, every team every single year. And
half the guys, in fact.
That's right. Half of them. So the fact that Tony Miller leaves, does it hurt Montana? Yes. Is it a question of why he would want to leave after not playing a game? Yes, it is. But you know what it is?
Standard.
Par for the course, brother. Par for the course. So
I do think that it's
if you start seeing 6, 7, 8 guys leaving, if you see what happens in Idaho,
totally with the difference,
then you're going, whoa.
Now you're leading me exactly where I want to go, though.
Well, that's what I'm here to do.
Here's the thing, though. Half the guys in Division I basketball are trying to transfer, right?
Sure. Yes.
But also half the teams in Division I basketball are losing. I think the thing that makes it unique, Idaho went 4-28 last year, and their coach just got fired. That's a direct correlation to having 9 guys in the transfer portal.
Well, they
Montana
were transferring
State,
before the firing.
Well, there was 5 guys in the portal and then 4 more after.
Yeah, okay.
Regardless.
Okay.
They knew that their coach was on the hot seat, and they knew – but again, they won 4 games.
Right.
Montana State grossly underachieved the last 2 years, and then Brian Fish got fired. The fact that they had 5 guys on their active roster when Danny Sprinkle inherited it is not a surprise. I just find it more striking that you have a team that's been to the NCAA tournament the last 2 years, and they have 52 wins in the last 2 years, and you have as much turnover as anybody in the league.
I think that is a very fair point.
There's no other winning programs in the league that have even close to this turnover. You have to equate it, right? saying 47% of guys in Division I basketball transfer. That is taken into account when Bill Evans gets fired and 9 of the 13 guys on scholarship at Idaho State leave. 9 out of 13 guys at Idaho leave. 8 out of the 13 guys at Montana State leave. Now, I mean, that's parlaying the 50% right there, because you're getting way more than 50% of the roster on bad teams with bad coaches, with bad situations. I again, there's also a ton of good teams. I mean, there's guys that are transferring from and to. I mean, Ray Travis from Stanford transferred to Kentucky last year. He's the first team All Pac-10 at Stanford, and he went to Kentucky. So it's not like anybody's immune to it. It happens all over the place. I just think it's very interesting that the University of Montana has had the amount of turnover that they've had. I mean, they've had 6 guys leave each of the last 2 off seasons. It's a lot.
Well, particularly, too, when you consider that if you include Donovan Dorsey, you got 5 guys that have graduated or are not returning that represent, 65-70% of the game minutes that are available to play in? I mean, if you're Tony Miller, it is your time. You would think. I mean, if you don't think that, you probably shouldn't be here. I would think that you would go, okay, 4 starters graduated. Donovan Dorsey, huge contributor, not coming back. You got Saeed Pridgett, a full-time starter, and Timmy Falls. And spot duty from Mac Anderson. Other than that, go get your spot. You want to play? You want to play in a program that is, proven it, a team that's been to the, tournament the last 2 seasons. This is, I mean, you should be ripe for the picking at the University of Montana if you're a player going into this season. I mean, talk about the most open of open competitions. You would think about playing time and starting and all that kind of stuff. Go get it, I don't know. It's what it is. Tutel Nuanez, got to get out.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River. In western Montana, we know shopping local matters, but we also know that you're going to pay more for the quality and customer service that comes with it. Well, not at Selway Armory. Selway Armory is locally owned with a staff of specialists that can answer any question. In addition to the expertise, though, Selway Armory also has a bigger selection and, are you ready, lower prices than the box stores. When you're in the market for firearms and accessories, save money with the experts at Selway Armory. Selway Armory, 2825 Stockyard Road, Unit E6, and online at selwayarmory.com.
Summer's here and the time is right for real fruit smoothies at Florence Coffee Company. Offered in flavors like strawberry, mango, peach, wild berry, and banana, and made with no artificial colors or flavors. Florence Coffee's fruit smoothies are the perfect summer treat. Enjoy a real fruit smoothie today at any Flowco locations or visit FlorenceCoffeeCo.com.
The best flavor under the big sky. Florence Coffee Company.
Springtime is the time to buy a new Polaris off-road vehicle. During the spring sales event, rebates go as high as $1,500 and financing is as low as 3.99%. Live your life wide open in a high-performance RZR. Tackle anything from mountains to mud holes on a legendary Sportsman ATV. Get more done with a hard-working Ranger, or take on any task or trail in a versatile Polaris General. Whatever you're looking for, now is the time to take your pick from the off-road's best-selling lineup. See Polaris.com or your Polaris dealer for rebates up to $1,500 and financing as low as 3.99% APR for 36 months during the Polaris Spring Sales event at Kurtz Polaris. Kurtz Polaris at 2904 West Broadway in Missoula and Highway 83 in Sealy. Recreate the right way with Kurtz Polaris, online at KurtzPolaris.com. Offer valid in U.S. through 5/31/19 on new 2015 through 2019 vehicles. Subject to credit approval. Offers vary by model. See dealer for details. Always wear a helmet. Never drink and ride.
Still emerging from your winter hibernation and need to get your bearings straight? Cruise on down to Port of Missoula for all your spring and summer needs. Come check out their men's and women's streetwear, sunglasses, and shoes from brands like Vans, Adidas, Thrasher, Volcom, and the original Port of Missoula brand. They also have all your skating needs covered, from tune-ups to fresh-made custom boards. Port of Missoula, Missoula's original board shop since 1989, on the Hip Strip, 618 South Higgins.
Tutel and Nuanez on 102.9 ESPN Radio for Missoula.
They always say congratulations. Work so hard, forgot how to vacation. They ain't never had
Tutel and Nuanez,
dedication.
live on the stream
People
at
hate
1029ESPN.com. The stream is available thanks to Opportunity Bank, your local bank, your opportunity. Now from the Kurtz Polaris studio, here is Ryan Tutel and Coulter Nuanez.
Missed anything in the show? Check it out on the podcast. The podcast is available on the TuneIn Radio app and on iTunes and on Spotify and wherever else you get your podcast. It's called Tutel and Nuanez. If we mention that, it's easy to find. Go get it there. The podcast is available thanks to the Wingate by Wyndham Hotel. We would be remiss if we did not briefly, even though he's not listening because he's on vacation right now, but give a shout out to our buddy Sean Rainey, who cleaned house at the E.B. Craney Awards over the weekend. Our comrade, compatriot, colleague over there at ABC Fox in Missoula, SWX Television, sports television sportscaster of the year, as well as like sports
feature of the year. He also got news story of the year too.
Yeah, I mean, what is he doing?
Sneaking in there, stealing it.
He's there's a lot of crossover there. We were certainly happy to be nominated and get an award in the sports coverage radio sports coverage category. So we're excited about that. And a big congratulations, frankly, Coulter, to you on that, because you go out there and you get all the guests and all the recruiting, all the people that you know and connect us to. So we're certainly happy to be there. But a big congratulations to Sean in particular, taking home some of the big hardware from the Montana State Broadcasting Awards that happened over the weekend. And we'll talk with him more about that. I get the impression, and God bless him, right? Sean will be happy to come on and talk about this with us. Will he not? I mean, he will be happy to talk about it.
I think the best thing I can say about Sean is he's happy to do anything.
He is. He's on
happy
board.
to do anything.
Into it. He's into
he's
it.
happy. He's happy to do an interview. He's happy to do a segment. He's happy to co-host the show for 3 days while you're in the Philippines.
He's legitimately happy too. He is.
He's just happy.
He's
happy guy.
happy
I think that's the key to success, though.
It's been a long time coming for him. He's been in it for quite a while, and he's won some awards before, but last night was kind of the culmination of some work for him. So, or Saturday night, rather.
The best thing I could say about Sean, I know he's not listening. Maybe he is. Is he around? I know he said he's on vacation.
I don't know. He'll listen to it later.
Regardless,
Yeah.
the best thing I could say about Sean is the best advice I ever got when it came to journalism, sports journalism, covering beats. Make the big time where you're at.
That's right.
And I told one of my former colleagues who had moved,
Frosty Westering, shout out. PLU.
I had told one of my former colleagues who had moved to Montana from Syracuse by way of Nashville, Tennessee. I said, what you're about to cover means almost nothing to most of the rest of the people in the United States. It means more than anything in the world to the people you're covering it for. So treat it like that, and it will take you far. And he ended up rising up through the ranks, covering Texas Tech and Odessa Permian and all the Friday Night Lights in West Texas and stuff like that. But the best thing I could say about Sean Rainey is that it does not matter if he's interviewing some standout athlete from a Class C girls basketball team or Bobby Houck. He treats it with the same level of enthusiasm, and that's why his stuff is good.
Yep.
Because he is cheerful and engaging no matter what.
He's into it.
And he makes everybody feel like it's a big deal to be on SWX, because guess what? It is.
It certainly is. Coulter, as we wind down here, we just got a couple of minutes left quickly. How about the University of Michigan baseball team? They're already up 4-0, bottom of the second inning, very early on, game one of the College World Series against Vanderbilt. Obviously, Vanderbilt, a recent pedigree of huge success. And Michigan, I mean, Michigan had a baseball team. You know what I mean? So here they're out there doing it.
Of course they do.
So,
they make $250 million
you
of revenue.
Understand what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying. It's down the list on the prestige of their endlessly prestigious athletic department.
And also the Missoula Osprey, a great series. They won their first home series of the year. They are now 4-5. Here's what's crazy: the Idaho Falls Chuckers 9-0 so far. Haven't lost a game through 3 full series, including a series sweep against the Missoula Osprey.
Which means in the Pioneer League, that means they'll be 10-9 soon.
Right? Yeah, exactly. It is flips. The script flips so quickly.
They'll try some other guys.
But Missoula is 4-2 in the rest of their games, which have all come against Great Falls. Took 2 of 3 in Great Falls, 2 of 3 in Missoula the last 3 days. Now Billings, who has just 1 win on the year, is coming into Missoula to play 3 games against the Osprey starting tonight. And so those games are going on. But a great night last night and a huge win for the Osprey. Kevin LaChance, a grand slam, putting it up and over. He had 1 hit in the season, and then goes sayonara.
He golfed that baby out there
grand
too.
Salami. He did. Got
but
one laced.
Almost to the tracks, maybe over the tracks.
We even got a little controversy. The manager of the
tossed
the Billings Mustangs did not get tossed him I think because the home plate umpire maybe knew that he maybe missed a couple. That's all I'm saying. It happens. Happens to the best of us. Anyway, Billings Mustangs, Missoula Osprey tonight, 6:45 on the air on ESPN Radio, and then all those games televised as well on SWX television. So tune in for that, boys and girls. First time ever, no national stuff except for the College World Series. What a great show! Back with you tomorrow. ESPN Radio, SWX Montana.
Right now at Carl Tyler Chevrolet, take advantage of employee pricing and up to $7,500 in rebates on all 2018 Silverados. Get the most out of your summer with a reliable truck that'll take you anywhere during Carl Tyler Chevrolet's June Silverado sell down. Save $11,719 on select 2018 Silverado 1500s. View our full inventory at gmofmontana.com or 3663 North Reserve Street. Carl Tyler Chevrolet. Find new roads.
Canyon River Golf Club is a must for any golfer in western Montana. Tucked away in a spectacular setting along the Clark Fork River in East Missoula, Canyon River offers one of Montana's best championship golf experiences. And Canyon River is happy to announce their new fleet of golf carts, which include the Shark Experience, an interactive GPS giving dynamic distances and touchscreen interaction to help you play your best. Plus, with Bluetooth, radio, and surround sound, you can enjoy yourself between holes too. Book online at CanyonRiverGolfClub.com. Missoula's best golf, Canyon River. In western Montana, we know shopping local matters, but we also know that you're going to pay more for the quality and customer service that comes with it. Well, not at Selway Armory. Selway Armory is locally owned with a staff of specialists that can answer any question. In addition to the expertise, though, Selway Armory also has a bigger selection and, are you ready, lower prices than the box stores. When you're in the market for firearms and accessories, save money with the experts at Selway Armory. Selway Armory, 2825 Stockyard Road, Unit E6, and online at selwayarmory.com. Hey everybody, here with my good friend Josh from the Advocates Injury Law Firm. Josh, if I've been in an accident, how much is it going to cost me to hire you?
Well, we take cases on a contingency fee. And what that means for you is that if you're hurt in an accident, we only get paid if you make a recovery. You'll never owe us anything out of pocket.
What about the call for a consultation?
That's not a problem. We don't charge anything for an initial consultation, so you have absolutely nothing to risk by calling us.
If you're injured in a car accident, call the Advocates, 640-4444, or online at montanaadvocates.com.
You're a big league fan. You expect big league service. At the Desperado, you get exactly that. With 35 flat screens, ice cold brews on tap, and Missoula's #1 wings, you're free to sit back and enjoy every pitch. This summer, make the Desperado your baseball home away from home. Cool off after work, relax on the weekends, soak in some great food and drinks, and watch your team make yet another great push for October. And hey, if yours can't do it, there's plenty of other teams and fun to go around at the Desperado Sports Tavern on South Russell across from the Y.
Welcome to today's lottery drawing. And today's winning numbers are not yours, not yours, and another number that's not yours. And the final number is not yours.
When it comes to having money, don't rely on luck.
Brew your own coffee at home instead of buying that latte. Brown bag it to work instead of ordering it. Go to feedthepig.org for more free ideas on how to save. Feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants and the Ad Council.
ESPN Radio for Western Montana, KKVU HD3 Stevensville, and 102.9 FM on K275BS Missoula.